Hi guys. So it's a pretty crazy time for England at the moment. A lot of mad stuff going on. I won't get into all of that because I don't really get into politics on the channel or anything of that nature. But I will say I don't think like law and order is really going to make this go away. However, the UK government have decided to come down pretty hard, not only on people involved in violence and things, but also in the online side of things, and using sort of vague terms, I guess, like incitement, misinformation, things like this. And so I wanted to talk more generally about the idea of misinformation because it's a very popular or a very widely used term at the moment. And it's used a lot by governments, it's used a lot by the media, who have historically controlled popular narratives and controlled the flow of information. And obviously in recent years they don't control the flow of information like they used to, because we have access to social media, we have camera phones, and we don't rely on them for information anymore. This is obviously bothersome to them for a lot of reasons, and some of those reasons might be valid, like false information can be dangerous and harmful, but at the same time, it seems a bit too coincidental that this thing that they've had a monopoly over and have misused for centuries really, has sort of fallen out of their hands somewhat, and now suddenly they're all deeply concerned for the consequences that might have for us. That isn't a coincidence, there's obviously a sort of ulterior motive there. But yeah, so the concept of misinformation. So this woman has been charged with spreading of misinformation in the UK, and the case itself is very, for a variety of reasons, it's very flimsy, because this information was shared hours before she shared it elsewhere. She shared it to a large number of followers, but it was shared elsewhere, I think 4 or 5 hours before it was on Facebook and it was on other places, and she was essentially just copying and pasting this information. But regardless, let's pretend that she didn't, and that she was the first person to share this. Is that a crime? I don't think it can ever be a crime. I think it can be a real problem. It can have serious consequences, of course. Particularly if you're speaking about a real person, and in which case it's a different area legally. But this person that she was referring to was completely fictitious, so this isn't even a libel thing or a defamation thing or whatever, or even an endangerment to a specific person's life, even if this information did end up endangering other people's lives. Not that it's that important for the purposes of this video, but I watched this whole thing kind of develop. A lot of the accounts that were spreading this narrative about the fake name of the attacker were very suspicious accounts. There were very few accounts that appeared trustworthy that were sharing this information. It seemed to be being tweeted over and over again by these kind of weird, either very fake looking with AI photos, or spammy accounts, or just odd accounts with no pictures that just look like bot accounts and dodgy accounts and foreign accounts. Those were most of the accounts that were sharing this. There weren't a lot of people really talking about it. The influence of this misinformation has been, I would say, somewhat overstated. It's when it came to the riots themselves, my estimation is that probably about half of the people there were under the impression that this was the real name, and about half of them knew that it wasn't. I think in the long run anyway, this wasn't going to make a big difference. This wasn't going to be the deciding factor as to whether there was, over this particular broader issue that this all revolves around, whether there was going to be unrest or not. I think that has been in the pipeline for years and years and years. So I think it's a strange one. Let's say she did make this name up, and I don't believe she did, because there's evidence of it having been posted elsewhere prior. And who knows what I'm even allowed to say on this subject now, because apparently everything we say has to be true, which is insanity, I think, and I'll explain why. But let's say she made this up, right? Because I was initially under the impression that she just made this up just to stir shit, basically. That would be a terrible thing to do, and did, to some degree, definitely fan the flames of the fire that was already there. That's for sure. So what she did was awful, if she did it, if she made it up herself. Just because something is morally wrong and inexcusable, that doesn't make it a crime. To turn your back on your family is one of the worst things a person can do, but we all accept that that's not a crime. I mean, I know in some aspects it's a crime if you don't, you have to support them financially and stuff, but apart from that, you don't have to do anything. You're not forced to be there at your kid's fucking birthday party. You're not forced to, answer their calls. You're not you're not forced to have the correct opinions on how they should grow as a human being, or what they need, or there's so many things you can do in life that are so cold or evil or just plain wrong, like objectively morally wrong, and they're not crimes, because we understand that, like, considering them as such would be a threat to our basic rights as human beings, our basic fundamental freedoms as human beings. So I think you have the right to be wrong about things. I think you have the right even to not tell the truth all the time. You have the right to make mistakes in the way that you convey information in most cases. I think the social consequences for something like this should be very high. If you've ever known someone that lies a lot, if you've ever known someone who's very deceitful, people don't like them. People don't want to be around them. There are social consequences for that. It's terrible to lie to people all the time, to trick them, to fool them. It's awful. But there are social consequences for that already, and there should be. Like, you shouldn't, if someone just makes up a fake name just to stir trouble and try and, like, create problems and create a situation, like, then they should be known as for having done that, if they really did do it. Again, in this case, I don't believe that is what she did. I think that she copied and pasted this from elsewhere, but people get things wrong all the time, and people can mishear things, people can misinterpret things, people can misremember things, people can be mistaken, people can be given false information by someone else, people can get confused, people can say things wrong. There are so many ways in which a person can provide false information, and probably, like, as much of the information we provide to one another on a daily basis is false as it is correct. Like, we get things wrong all the time. There's a very, very, very thin line between protecting, trying to avoid public disorder and, stop the spread of, in quotes, misinformation, and then just kind of obligating people to say and think and believe certain very specific mandated things, which is Orwellian, like completely Orwellian. There is just no other way of looking at it. People can, cheer when it happens to someone they don't like, but at the end of the day, that framework is put in place for it to happen to you as well, and it will happen to you or someone like you at some point, somewhere down the line, if we allow this to be normalized. So many of these things at first are, so many of these powers are first fully realized on the basis of some perceived threat, like misinformation, like public disorder. So even, like, let's say well, we talk about like conspiracies, right? There's been a very successful campaign, sort of, I would argue, establishment / legacy media kind of campaign to demonize the very concept of conspiracy theories. And a lot of the time these aren't conspiracy theories, because a conspiracy theory involves conspirators, a group of people conspiring, and some of these are just alternative beliefs about things. They're not even conspiracy theories. It's just a theory that is not the predominantly accepted one, or even not the one that is predominantly provided by the establishment. So the term is misleading anyway, but it's been lumped in conspiracy theories, misinformation, fake news, all of these things. They all come under a similar category, and people use the term conspiracy theory as a pejorative, which is really odd because it's just a type of theory. So there's nothing in the term conspiracy theory that tells you whether it is true or false or valid or what political leaning it has or anything. It's two things. It's a theory, and it involves in some way a group of conspirators. The theory alleges that there are a group of conspirators involved. So when people say, "Oh, that's a conspiracy theory," don't say that. That's a conspiracy theory. It doesn't make any sense as a statement. It's ridiculous, because it's like saying that's a groundbreaking new idea. Don't say that. It doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. Like, it's a ridiculous thing to say. It's ridiculous to use the term conspiracy theory as a pejorative term. You can use it to clarify that something's not an established fact. Say, no, that's not true. That's just a conspiracy theory. That doesn't mean that all conspiracy theories are wrong. It just means, no, in this case, the information you've heard is not actually correct in my opinion, but it's actually just a popular conspiracy theory. That in and of itself does not disprove the conspiracy theory. You're just basically saying that you don't subscribe to that particular conspiracy theory, and that's where this information comes from, is from a conspiracy theory. That's it. It doesn't, it's just ridiculous. So anyway, look at the case of Jeffrey Epstein, for example. First of all, before any of this happened, before all of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff really came out, it was a conspiracy theory. The Jimmy Savile stuff was a conspiracy theory. The fraudulent basis for the Iraq War and then the subsequent suspicious death of Dr. David Kelly, the theories surrounding those were conspiracy theories. The idea that there wasn't a valid basis for going to war in Iraq, which is now accepted as true, that was a conspiracy theory, and it was going against a very popular, a widely purported establishment narrative. So that's the kind of territory we get into here. It's not just about mobs going out and with a fake name and going out and causing trouble. It's not just about someone alleging something happened that didn't happen. It's not just about, crazy ideas about what the government are doing and, these things being, like lizard people and stuff. Like, there are a lot of things that would, under this definition, be considered misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, fake news, that many of which have turned out to be completely true. People have a right to believe things that are not true. That's it. They don't. I personally, not that I've given it a great deal of thought, but I don't think you have the right to say a thing about a person, to make a firm statement of fact about a person and say this person, did this or whatever. Or at least I can see that there's a difficult thing there that we need to, a difficult sort of legal area there when you're naming a specific person and saying very explicitly, very publicly, to like a large audience, they did, this person killed this person or something. I can understand why that might need to be legislated. But when you're just talking about someone being incorrect, potentially, about something, that can't be a crime. Because if it is, take, for example, in the example of the riots, numerous politicians, including the Prime Minister himself, have shared incorrect information about what's been going on. They've used incorrect names for people and groups. They've shared incorrect information about incidents that have taken place. They've been wrong about certain things, and people can get things wrong. The police can get things wrong, but there's no, we all get things wrong. So whilst if we are to assume, for the sake of being generous towards the argument that misinformation should be a crime, a punishable crime, if we are to assume that this woman really did just like make this thing up, I believe that that's her right to do so. It's not a right that she should abuse. I don't agree with people abusing that right, but I think that is your right to do. It also is contingent upon there being facts, like fact checkers, fact-checking organisations which are very questionable. One of the ways we determined what is and isn't in fact is through studies, through science, through university studies, and those are frequently co-opted by huge corporations, by corrupt governments, or by corrupt ideologies. You can't rely on them solely. We can't even agree on basic facts of physics and chemistry. So it's very hard to agree on basic facts of like society and, like things that happen in the world around us on a daily basis. It's almost impossible. So we have these fact-checking organizations who check facts, and they're as prone to bias or error or stupidity as anyone else. There's nothing that makes, just because they're called a fact-checking organization, there's nothing that makes them more valid. Nothing that makes their opinion more valid than mine or yours. But we've given them, aka the state, the establishment, the power to decide what is and isn't true. And I know that saying things are Orwellian has become a bit played out and redundant at this stage, right? Every time anything like this ever happens, people say it's Orwellian, but it is Orwellian. This is what it is. Like, when the government can decide what is true, and if you don't go along with their version of the truth, then we're in trouble. And as I said, it's not about this case specifically. This case is a very odd example. A, because the information was so obviously completely made up and pulled out of thin air by someone. We don't know who. By someone. I kind of think there was foreign actors at play, as in a foreign government disinformation campaign from one of the usual suspects in that regard. I don't know. Maybe that's a fucking conspiracy theory as well. The idea, all the Russia stuff. But regardless, what was I saying? I can't remember. But basically, it's contingent upon them to be able to tell us what is and isn't true. So in other cases, it could be literally them saying, no, it's been proven that Jeffrey Epstein did. Jeffrey Epstein, right? So yeah, I was saying about his crimes, Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Those were a conspiracy theory. Jeffrey Epstein's death, right? Do you know anybody in real life that thinks Jeffrey Epstein killed himself? Do you know anybody who believes that? I know there are a lot of people who don't really care, because if something is on the news, they don't want to dig deeper. They don't really want to question it. And for a lot of people, the news is like an entertainment product or a kind of form of anesthesia. Like, they don't really... Older people, like, they don't want to actually... They don't, we don't want you to, like, fucking peel back the curtain and show them what really lies beneath. They don't actually want that. Like, you think that they're blinded by the media. They're choosing to be, a lot of people. Like, so when they see, for example, a really suspicious story like Jeffrey Epstein, they're sort of like, well, okay, if they're not going to tell me in the news that this is suspicious and they're not going to really dig into this, then I don't care, and I'm not going to really give it much attention, because they can't be bothered, and that's fine. That's their choice. But do you know anybody that really vehemently says that Jeffrey Epstein did actually kill himself? No one believes that. No one thinks it. That is still a conspiracy theory. That would be classed as misinformation, and could easily, under these rules, be classed as spreading misinformation. There is no evidence that he killed himself. Therefore, the police said this. Therefore, you're spreading misinformation because the police have said this. Let's imagine another incident where a crime is committed and a patsy is used. Let's talk about, for example, JFK's assassination. Most people can see that the official story there is bollocks. Again, I don't even know what I can say anymore. Be a bit mad to get in trouble for talking about the JFK assassination. But most people know that that's bollocks, right? If you had information, credible information, maybe you couldn't prove it, but everybody knew, everyone in the public knew that the person that really did it, or the organisation that really did it, the entity that really did it, but the official story was, and still is, that Lee Harvey Oswald did it, that would be misinformation. For you to say, no, Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do it, that would be misinformation. And in that case, so in a case similar to the recent one, there could be an incident where the person that they're saying did something really didn't do it, and it's a cover-up or it's a patsy, and people know who really did this, and you're not allowed to say it. You're not allowed to share that information because it's a crime. So even just 1 degree of separation from this incident, and you're already looking at something that is very suppressive, very Orwellian, very controlling, very dystopian, and a huge threat to our basic freedoms and everything else. So when it comes to the actual level of threat posed by misinformation, I think most people are going to look for reliable sources of information. For some people, yeah, they might look at like the Tate brothers retweeting something and be like, oh my God, I have to go out and, do whatever. Most people, by and large, are not going to see like a retweet from Andrew Tate and use that as the basis for their, and if they are, to be honest, it's probably not a super like serious thing to them. I used this example with a friend earlier, but say, okay, you've been in an ongoing feud with a person, and this person keeps robbing your house, and you keep robbing their house, and you've had numerous fist fights. You fight each other all the time. But for some reason, you and this guy are just absolute fuck-ups. And you fight each other all the time, and you're always having this never-ending conflict. And say his name is Steve. And one day, you're at home, and you can't find your phone. And I say, oh yeah, Steve stole your phone. I saw him. Steve stole it. And you go, that fucking bastard Steve. I'm going to go over and I'm going to batter Steve. And you go and you find Steve and you beat him up. And you say, you took my fucking phone. And he says, no, I didn't steal it. Your phone is in your pocket. And you find your phone in your pocket and you're like, oh shit, sorry Steve. But at the end of the day, you were primed to believe that because you and Steve have already had this long-standing conflict, and it wasn't hard for you to believe that, right? So for the most part, what you are believing there in that situation is the reality that you actually know, the reality that you've lived all of your life in, what you've seen, what has happened, what you've experienced. The trigger might have been something I told you that was false, but what you really were reacting to was not just your phone, but me saying that Steve took your phone. Imagine another situation. There's another person who's your friend you get along very well with, that you have no reason to believe they would ever steal your phone. John. Victor. Let's give him a more interesting name. And you're looking for your phone, and I say, Victor stole your phone. And you'd go, no, I don't think he did. I said, no, seriously, I saw Victor steal your phone. And you go, no, Victor wouldn't do that. And I'm saying, seriously, I saw him do it. Victor definitely stole your phone. And then other people start saying, yeah, Victor took your phone. You'll probably go to Victor and approach him and say, did you take my phone? And Victor will be like, no, what the fuck are you talking about? I didn't steal your phone. And you'll be like, everyone's saying he stole my phone. And he'll be like, I didn't steal your phone. You're going to be very hesitant to act. You're not going to punch Victor in the face. You've been friends with him for years, and he's adamant he didn't do it, and, whatever. And then you go, oh, my phone's in my pocket, or whatever, and you find out. So, this is not to say that the misinformation has not in either situation caused any problem. In one situation, it's caused you to confront Victor, who didn't do anything wrong, and probably to make him pretty annoyed. Maybe he won't even like you anymore. And the other situation is cause you to punch this person. But in both situations, the driving underlying factor has been reality as you know it. So whilst we can be influenced by this kind of information, it's really just in most cases reality is the cake, and this is just the cherry on top potentially. This isn't going to be, sorry, there's a parcel, I don't know if it's for me. No. It's not going to be the driving factor. Certainly at this point in human history, at this point in the history of information technology, just seeing one piece of information in isolation is not, the underlying reality is a lot more important, is what I'm trying to say. So when the underlying reality is as much of a factor as it is at present, and as it was even in cases like Jeffrey Epstein, the underlying factor being complete mistrust in the elites, and in the media, those are gonna always, at least for the time being, have a lot more impact on people. Those underlying aspects of reality are going to have a lot more impact on people than one piece of false information, no matter how widely it circulates. At the end of the day, the things you see with your eyes, the things you experience, the things you've known for years are more important and will have much more of an impact on you. So it's not to say that the information isn't an issue, that false information isn't an issue, but if the underlying reality isn't changed, then it doesn't matter how much you control the information, like, the problem will still remain. And moreover, you'll do a better job of trying to combat false narratives by creating an environment in which they don't have any credibility. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. So I think that should be the message, is not how can we subvert people's dignity and freedom and privacy even more to try and stop anyone from doing anything we don't approve, we don't want them to do. I mean, it's insane. The rhetoric is insane. It's actually really scary. But it should be, okay, well, why were people so quick to believe this? We can take a sort of misanthropic view on that and say, look at these vermin that just believe everything and let's punish them. Or you could say, well, why were people so quick to believe this? Why was this story able to have credibility? I'm not saying there are no circumstances where a story like that could be believed without any underlying context that gives it credibility. It could happen. It definitely could happen. I'm not trying to say that this can never be a problem. I'm simply trying to say that in almost all cases it would be better to try and understand the larger issue and to deal with it in other ways than to just curtail people's freedoms to such a ridiculous extent that most government officials, I mean, look at their behaviour during 2020 and 2021. A lot of the stuff that came out then was definitely not true and has been proven as such in hindsight. I don't see any of them behind bars. So what's going on? What are the rules? What if it's basically, if that is a crime, we are all criminals, all of us. So it's crazy. It's really scary to me and crazy. The other thing is that underlies all of this, and it's why these terms have become so popular. It's not just because of social media. It's not because people are now free to say what they want, or they're not really, but on Twitter they are, on X, and that has obviously become a source of huge concern for the establishment. It's kind of funny as well. The sickest, and I won't get into the political aspect of any of this. I would prefer not to in the comments, to be honest, because I try to just keep all of that away from YouTube, because it's just all divisive and whatever. But But the funniest thing I've seen in all of this is Alistair Campbell constantly having a go at Elon Musk for basically allowing people to say whatever they want, for giving people a platform that provides freedom of speech, which his government took away from us in the UK anyway. And he's one of the main proponents of the Iraq War. And there's just a bizarre, like, self-hating sort of psychopathic irony to it. It's just the weirdest thing to read his remarks about all this, and to be so resentful of the idea that people can say whatever they want, as though that hasn't worked out absolutely fine in so many democratic societies, and it's not an issue. But anyway, yeah, the issue is these days is not that people can say what they want, it's that people don't trust the establishment anyways. If we felt listened to by the government, if we felt like we had any sort of, the government don't communicate with people, they don't listen to people, they don't, even when they use Twitter to just bark orders at you and like bark out statements and or make performative PR gestures and put photos of them being, in quotes, a good person, and like they don't have any interest in what people think or want. It hasn't really been for a long time a democracy in England. It's not. There's no, people are well aware that the people in charge of the country and of the media, they don't care what we think. They don't care what if we even. It's just a constant game of like deception and control and abuse of power. So people don't want to believe what they say, like people, I don't know because I wasn't there. I would imagine people didn't have that hard of a time believing Churchill, We were deceived a lot during the war back home. People back home were deceived a lot about what was going on. We were lied to. And the people fighting were lied to. Nobody's angry about that. And also, people didn't have a hard time believing it. And they weren't in a mode of thinking, what's the fucking motive here? What are they doing? Why are they telling me this? What's really going on? Because they felt like they had an establishment that cared about them. And they felt like the BBC cared about them. And again, I don't know. I wasn't there. This is what I believe to be true. But people don't feel like that now. Trust in the media is at an all-time low. Trust in the BBC as an organisation is at an all-time low. It goes down and down all the time. It has little peaks and valleys, but really it just is going down and down. Trust in the establishment is at an all-time low, or maybe not an all-time low. It's probably worse, like sometime in the past. But in recent recorded history, these things are pretty much all at an all-time low, with good reason. People don't feel, from any side of the political spectrum, don't feel represented, respected, cared about. People are just talked down to non-stop and lied to a lot. And then we're told, don't say anything that's not true or you'll fucking go to prison. That's a police state. It's frightening. It's Orwellian. It's tyrannical. It's authoritarian. It's whatever you want to call it. It's really, really bad, and we should not allow ourselves to be brainwashed into this idea of conspiracy theories, in quotes, being, this is like a pejorative term, and that misinformation and fake news and whatever else from the public are like the biggest threats to our sense of understanding of reality and of the world, because they're not. The much bigger threat is that what we say and believe and think is fully controlled, and that we're not allowed. We don't have that basically it's better to have false information around you and real information, and have free access to information, and for there to be some incorrect information, and for you to be free as an individual to try and find out for yourself and use your intelligence as an individual to do that, then for the government to say, no, you can only access one channel of information and that is it, and you will take it, and you're too stupid to sort through the rest of it, and we don't want you to, because that would get in the way of what we're trying to do. The former is obviously better. It's not perfect,
There are, to quote Thomas Sowell, there are no trade-offs, only solutions. Like, this is just it's backwards. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. This is a trade-off. You can't. It's clearly bad. It's clearly bad that people will post bullshit online and it spreads, and it's definitely an issue. It's one that could be dealt with anyway in other ways, like a younger age, like teaching people to have about cognitive bias and stuff, and teaching people reasoning skills. But yeah, it's bad, but it's just a trade-off we have to make, because the alternative is so scary, and it's not being dramatic to say that it's Orwellian. It really is. It really, really is. I'm scared at what's happening to the country. It's been happening for years. It really started, well, the recent trend began about 25 years ago, but really we had it before for different reasons. We had like profanity laws and weird shit like that. But there's all these terms, all this fear mongering done around hate speech, misinformation, conspiracy theories, fake news, blah, blah, blah. And all of it really comes down to they want to control what you say, what you think, what you believe, and what everyone thinks about them. That is really the sole purpose of it. It's not about what is genuinely best for you, because most of the time it's made very clear they don't care about what is genuinely best for you, or at least they don't care about what you feel is best for you. They care about what they feel is best for you. That has been made abundantly clear for quite some time now, that we are apparently too stupid to think or decide anything for ourselves, and it has to be decided for us by people who I don't think come off as particularly bright or particularly sensible or particularly anything other than just people that want power. And we shouldn't let people like that control what we think and say. So yeah, that's all. Thanks for watching, guys. Maybe elsewhere I'll talk a bit more about the situation in general, but fuck me, it's a contentious topic, and yeah, it's not something I care to get into on the channel. But thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Hope you're all doing well, guys, and take care.